Hello everybody and welcome back to the Data Playbook. So this video is meant to be a pregame review of the Sunday game that happens at 9:30 in the morning with Minnesota at Pittsburgh, which is really in Dublin. So with our team stats, the first thing to notice is that I actually finally got the team allowed yards in and kind of did a ranking of the defense then based on that. So this will represent the defense over here. This represents the offense. But looking at everything else, like we normally do on this panel, you have the Vikings favored on the money line over the Steelers with a spread of 2.5 and a total line of 41.5 points. And looking at the rankings that I've set up here, you have a passing ranking of 29 for Minnesota, which is kind of to be expected with JJ and the quarterback issues they've had, and a rushing rank of 13, so about the middle of the pack there. Minnesota is third best allowed in the passing rank, meaning that they allow the third fewest passing yards per game. And on the Steelers side, you have a passing rank of 24 and a rushing rank of 31, so that puts them pretty below average. They're 28th in allowed passing rank and 26th allowed rushing rank, so they allow quite a bit of yardage. This is a quick look at the season totals, if you want to pause and take a look at any of those numbers. But I'll just look at the averages. Over on Minnesota's side, you have an average of 167 passing yards per game. They have had the mix-up with quarterbacks, and now Wentz being the starting quarterback, which we'll look at here in a minute. But that can explain some of these lower numbers. They average 122 rushing yards per game for Minnesota. Minnesota's also thrown one interception on average per game and suffers 4 sacks on average per game. Looking at the Steelers, you have almost 200 passing yards per game, just shy of that, but only averaging 63 rushing yards per game. I imagine that will still stay low since they've averaged pretty low, and they're going to face a pretty rough or a pretty stout rushing defense. The Steelers also average 1 passing interception per game, but only average almost 2.5 sacks per game. Looking at the defense side, on average, Minnesota allows 161 passing yards and 130 rushing yards. The Steelers average 160 passing yards allowed and almost 140 rushing yards allowed. Minnesota averages 5.6 QB hits per game. Steelers average 7.3, and they average about 3 sacks per game. Steelers just slightly less. And looking at the quarterbacks in a little bit more depth, we have Carson Wentz filling in for J.J. McCarthy and Aaron Rodgers. McCarthy has no interceptions, while Aaron Rodgers has 3, so I believe Minnesota averaged 1 interception per game. We saw in that previous panel, but that means all of them came from J.J. and none of them have come from Carson Wentz yet. In one game, though, Carson has suffered 3 sacks, and for this season, Aaron Rodgers has suffered 7 sacks. Looking at their averages, you have Aaron Rodgers with almost 200 passing yards per game, and not very much rushing as we know. And looking at Carson Wentz, we have 173 passing yards, since there's only been 1 game, and only 4 rushing yards on 2 carries. And looking just through the details again, 173 passing yards, 2 touchdowns for Carson Wentz last game, so not too bad, giving him 15.3 fantasy points. And with Aaron Rodgers, 244, 203, and then 139 last game against New England. He still got 2 passing touchdowns in that last game, though, and that gives him a total of 47.4 fantasy points. Taking a look at the running backs, we have Jordan Mason filling in for Aaron Jones, and you have Jalen Warden for Pittsburgh. Looking at the season, neither of them have had any turnovers. You have Jordan Mason with about 35 fantasy points, depending on which format you're looking at, and Jalen Warden with 44.4 in PPR, 33.4 in non-PPR. Looking at their season averages, you have Jordan Mason with 71.3 average rushing yards, and you have Jalen Warden with 44 average rushing yards. You also have Jalen Warden averaging 47 receiving yards per game, while Jordan Mason only gets about 5 receiving yards per game. Breaking it down, you have Jordan Mason with 68 rushing yards in that first game, 30 in the second, and 116 in the last one. Jalen Warden has 37, 48, and 47. So averaging kind of lower down there. But looking at his receiving yards, he gets 22, 86 in the second week, and 34 last week. So he is a bit more of a dump-off back, maybe more useful in PPR formats. And a quick look at the number one wide receivers. You have Justin Jefferson from Minnesota and DK Metcalf on the Steelers. You have Justin Jefferson with 26.4 fantasy points, 38.4 in PPR, and DK Metcalf at 25.5 fantasy points, 35.5 in PPR. Neither of them have any turnovers. Justin Jefferson averages 66.6 receiving yards per game, and DK Metcalf averages 45 receiving yards per game. Week by week, you have Justin Jefferson with 44 receiving yards, 81 receiving yards, and then 75 last week, getting his top 5 receptions per game, the most he's had this season. And with DK Metcalf, you have 83 yards, 20, and then 32. So he's trending a little further down. And we can see that DK Metcalf only gets about 20% of the receiving yards compared to the other ones who get receiving yards. So we'll take a look at down here. I believe that's Calvin Austin. And I'll bring him up real fast since he gets this large 47.75 chunk. Almost half of all of the receiving yards. But over here, Justin Jefferson gets 36.73%, highest of his whole team. So looking at Calvin Austin, he has 24.6 fantasy points, 32.6 PPR, so almost the same amount as DK Metcalf, also with no turnovers, averaging 42 receiving yards per game. He got 70 receiving yards in the first game, 22 and 34. So I'd say he's maybe a little closer. Maybe this is a little off, and I need to look into this a little bit more. That's going to be what changes next, hopefully, as well as a way to look at the some more of the matches, hopefully, next week between their defensive counterparts. And looking at the tight ends, since I haven't been looking at the tight ends, I figure I should incorporate them a little bit more. Here you have TJ Hawkinson, and you have Jonnu Smith for Pittsburgh, with Hawkinson getting 13.6 fantasy points, 22.6 PPR, and 12.5 fantasy points and 24.5 PPR for Jonnu Smith. Neither of them have lost any turnovers. And looking at the average, you have 25.3 receiving yards per game for Hawkinson and 21.6 for Jonnu Smith. Per game, you have 15 and 12, and then 49 for Hawkinson, who finally got that touchdown. For Jonnu Smith, you had 15 receiving yards, 27, and then 23. Jonnu Smith has a very small amount of the receiving yards, while Hawkinson has a little bit of a larger portion with 12.85%. So that's all I have for that matchup. I hope you enjoy. I'm going to keep improving. I'm sorry that there's not more at this point. It's just been busy. But if you want to see what's to come, then leave a like and subscribe. Leave a comment on what else you would like to see. And until next time, thank you so much for watching.